Before exploitation ever becomes obvious, it begins quietly through language. Control does not arrive as force, it arrives as meaning. Words are the first instruments of psychological influence, because the mind accepts ideas long before the body recognizes danger. This is why narcissistic manipulation always starts with phrases, not actions. These phrases are not random. They are carefully chosen signals designed to test your inner world, your empathy, your need for connection, your fear of being misunderstood. From a Jungian perspective, these words activate what lives beneath your conscious awareness. They reach into the shadow, the part of you that wants to feel special, needed, chosen. When someone speaks in a way that mirrors your deepest emotional longings, the ego relaxes, defenses soften, you feel seen. But what feels like recognition is often projection. The narcissistic individual is not truly seeing you. They are sensing where you are most open. This is why the manipulation feels so subtle at first. Nothing sounds cruel. Nothing sounds threatening. In fact, the phrases often sound intimate, even vulnerable. Yet their purpose is diagnostic. They are watching how quickly you take responsibility for their emotions, how easily you prioritize their feelings over your own intuition, how willing you are to trade self-respect for emotional closeness. Jung warned that when we are unconscious of our psychological patterns, we do not choose, we are chosen. And this is the danger. When words bypass awareness, they shape behavior without consent. You begin adjusting yourself, explaining yourself, proving yourself, all without realizing that the center of gravity has shifted away from you. Once you understand that words come before control, you regain power. You stop reacting emotionally and start observing psychologically. And in that moment, manipulation loses its invisibility. Remember this: awareness is not suspicion, it is self-respect. The moment you listen more closely to language, you stop being controlled by it. One of the most disarming phrases a narcissistic woman uses is, "You're the only one who truly understands me." On the surface, it sounds like intimacy. It feels like recognition. But psychologically, it is a powerful act of separation. The moment you accept this role, you are no longer simply a partner. You become a refuge, a mirror, and eventually a container for her unmet needs. From a Jungian viewpoint, this phrase operates through projection. She is not recognizing your unique understanding. She is externalizing her inner emptiness and attaching it to you. You are being elevated, but elevation is not respect. It is positioning. By placing you above everyone else, she subtly removes everyone else from relevance. Friends, family, and even your own inner voice begin to fade, replaced by the unspoken responsibility to remain the one. This is how emotional dependency is formed without overt demand. You begin to feel special, then necessary, and finally indispensable. And once indispensability is established, obligation follows. You hesitate to disagree. You ignore discomfort. You carry emotional weight that was never yours to hold. Jung described this as identification with a role rather than the self. You stop relating as an individual and start functioning as a psychological object. True understanding does not isolate, it integrates. Healthy intimacy invites you into connection without requiring sacrifice of autonomy. When someone insists that only you can understand them, what they are really saying is that no one else is allowed to challenge their narrative. The phrase is less about closeness and more about control disguised as emotional exclusivity. The moment you hear this, the question is not whether you care, but whether you are being pulled away from yourself. Because love that demands isolation is not connection, it is containment. Remember this: real intimacy expands your world, it never shrinks it. If understanding costs you your independence, the price is already too high. Another phrase that often appears just before exploitation deepens is, "I've been hurt before, please don't be like them." It arrives wrapped in vulnerability, and that is precisely why it works. Pain is presented not as something being processed, but as something being transferred. In that moment, you are quietly assigned a role: protector, redeemer, proof that the past can be corrected. This is not an invitation to intimacy. It is an emotional contract you never consciously agreed to. From a Jungian perspective, this is projection in its most subtle form. Responsibility for her unresolved wounds is placed onto you, while her own shadow, the parts that contributed to those past failures, remains unexamined. You become the moral counterweight to her history. Your behavior is no longer evaluated on its own merits, but on how well it prevents her from feeling old pain. The relationship shifts from mutual presence to emotional management. What makes this phrase so powerful is the guilt it installs. Disagreement now feels dangerous. Boundaries feel cruel. Even healthy independence begins to look like betrayal. You are no longer relating as two autonomous individuals, but as one person walking on psychological glass, afraid that any misstep will confirm her deepest fears. Jung warned that when compassion is unbalanced by consciousness, it becomes self-erasure. And this is where many people lose themselves, not through cruelty, but through excessive understanding. True healing does not require a savior. It requires responsibility. When someone asks you to carry the weight of their past, they are avoiding the work of integrating it themselves. Empathy should open connection, not bind you to another person's wounds. The moment you realize that love is not meant to repair someone's history, you regain your freedom. You are not here to correct the past. You are here to live truthfully in the present. At a certain point, the language shifts, and the phrase emerges, "If you really loved me, you would." This is where affection quietly becomes a transaction. Love is no longer something that exists freely between two people. It becomes a test you are expected to pass. The request itself may seem small at first, changing a behavior, sacrificing a preference, overlooking a boundary, but psychologically, something profound has changed. Love has been turned into leverage. From a Jungian lens, this phrase exploits the ego's deepest fear, abandonment. It suggests that love is conditional, fragile, and always at risk of being withdrawn. You are no longer asked what feels right or true to you. You are asked to prove devotion through compliance. Over time, this erodes the inner authority that Jung believed was essential for individuation. Instead of acting from the self, you begin acting from anxiety, trying to preserve connection by shrinking your own needs. What makes this manipulation so effective is that it disguises power as vulnerability. The implication is not "I want control," but "I need reassurance." Yet reassurance never satisfies, because the goal is not closeness, it is dominance. Each time you comply, the condition shifts. What once felt like love now feels like performance. You start negotiating against yourself, giving more to receive less, all while believing you are preserving intimacy. Healthy love does not require proof. It does not demand sacrifice of values or silence of intuition. It allows disagreement without threatening abandonment. When love must be earned through obedience, it ceases to be love and becomes a hierarchy, one where your worth is constantly under review. The moment you stop proving and start choosing, the spell breaks. Love is not something you demonstrate by losing yourself. It is something that survives because you remain whole. Eventually, the most damaging phrase appears, often delivered calmly, even casually: "You are overreacting," or its close companion: "You're too sensitive." This is the moment when manipulation stops targeting your behavior and starts targeting your perception. What is being challenged now is not what you did, but your right to feel and interpret reality. And when perception is attacked, the psyche begins to fracture. From a Jungian perspective, this is where gaslighting takes full form. Your inner compass, the intuitive function that tells you when something is wrong, is dismissed as faulty. Over time, you begin to doubt your own emotional responses. Discomfort becomes embarrassment. Intuition becomes anxiety. You start editing your reactions before you even express them, asking yourself whether you are allowed to feel what you feel. This is not conflict resolution. It is psychological erosion. What makes this phrase so destructive is its authority. It positions her as the arbiter of reality, and you as the unreliable narrator of your own experience. Once that hierarchy is established, any objection you raise can be invalidated before it is even heard. Jung warned that when a person loses trust in their own perception, they become dependent on external validation to define truth. This is how control becomes internalized. She no longer needs to dominate openly. You do it to yourself. Healthy relationships do not require you to abandon your inner witness. They allow emotional differences without declaring one person defective. Sensitivity is not weakness, it is information. Reaction is not pathology, it is feedback. When someone consistently denies your emotional reality, the issue is not your sensitivity, it is their refusal to be accountable. The moment you stop arguing about whether your feelings are valid and start honoring them as signals, clarity returns. You do not need permission to trust yourself. Remember this: anyone who teaches you to doubt your own reality is not guiding you toward love. They are guiding you away from yourself. Once these patterns become visible, question is no longer what is happening, but what you will do next. Awareness, while essential, is not enough on its own. Insight must be followed by action, or it quietly turns into endurance. The final stage of reclaiming yourself is not confrontation, persuasion, or even explanation. It is withdrawal of misplaced energy and the restoration of clear boundaries. From a Jungian perspective, this is the work of individuation. You are no longer organizing your life around another person's emotional gravity. Instead, you return authority to the self. Boundaries are not punishments. They are psychological borders that protect your inner world from invasion. When you stop over-explaining, stop defending your feelings, and stop negotiating your worth, the dynamic shifts immediately. Not because the other person suddenly understands, but because you do. This is often the most difficult step, because it triggers guilt. You may feel selfish, cold, or unloving. But Jung reminded us that guilt often appears when the ego resists any key. Essery growth. Choosing clarity over chaos will always feel uncomfortable to those who benefited from your confusion. Yet peace does not require approval. It requires alignment. Reclaiming power also means accepting a difficult truth. You cannot heal someone who does not wish to confront themselves. Letting go of that responsibility is not abandonment, it is psychological maturity. When you stop trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you, your energy returns. Your perception stabilizes. Your sense of self strengthens. The work now is simple, but not easy. Observe, detach, and act in accordance with your values rather than your fears. This is how manipulation ends, not with dramatic exits, but with quiet self-loyalty. Remember this: the moment you choose yourself without apology, the cycle breaks. Freedom does not begin when they change, it begins when you do.